This video is part of our second series of presentations about the Book of Mormon. Because the prophet Joseph Smith taught the early church leaders that the Lehite colony landed in South America, we have created this series of videos. Our theories and research is based on the truths from the Book of Mormon, but should not be considered as official church doctrine. The Temple of Nephi and the Temple of Koricancha, Part 2, by L. Norman Shurtleff. Manner of construction. Nephi says that the manner of construction of his temple was like unto the Temple of Solomon. What does that mean exactly? The Temple of Solomon was rebuilt twice, and only parts of the original construction remain, which would be the foundation stones of the Temple Mount, or outer wall of the temple courtyard. The original foundation stones of the temple's courtyard walls can still be seen today. The final Jerusalem temple, of course, was destroyed in 70 A.D. by the Romans. One of the most incredible tours of Jerusalem can be taken today is a walk through the tunnel of the west wall, which starts by the western wailing wall of the temple block. This modern tunnel was hewn out to expose the rest of the western wall and follows the course underground of the foundation of the Temple Mount and the courtyard wall some 23 feet below the street level of the present day. The huge blocks of stone that form the foundation are colossal and monstrous in size and weight, with some probably weighing upwards of 100 to 200 tons. These stones fit so perfectly on top of each other that cement was not needed to bond them together, and a knife blade cannot be put between their joints. Truly remarkable were these craftsmen that were responsible for such construction without the modern tools and equipment that we have today. Such construction can only be seen today in a few places. Notably, they include the foundations of the great pyramids of Egypt, the Temple Mount at Jerusalem, and in the construction of pre-Inca buildings in Peru, particularly the Temple of Koricancha. The exact description of the stone masonry of Solomon's temple we do not have. However, a good description of the construction process is found in the scriptures in 2 Chronicles, where it states, "And Solomon determined to build an house for the name of the Lord, and an house for his kingdom. And Solomon told out 70,010 men to bear burdens, and 80,000 to hew or quarry stone in the mountain, and 3,600 to oversee them." 2 Chronicles chapter 2, verses 1 to 2. Therefore, the process of building the temple took 7 years, with 80,000 stone masons, hewing the stone in the quarries necessary for all the courses in the temple walls and courtyard walls. If the temple stones averaged 2 feet in height, as an example, then 25 courses of stone would have been needed to complete the walls to a height of 45 feet, which were covered with a roof made of cedar trees from Lebanon. The stones would have been shaped and dressed at the quarry perfectly, so that no chiseling was needed to be done at the sacred temple site. The stones would be larger at the bottom tiers, graduating to smaller stones as the walls rose in height. They would be perfectly hewn and shaped so that no mortar was needed to bond the stones together. The wall would have had a leaning or Egyptian style construction that was common in this period. 70,000 workers were required to transport the finished blocks to the Temple Mount, as well as other building materials during the 7-year construction period. Nephi, of course, was a young boy when he left Jerusalem. He had not been involved in major construction projects of this magnitude. Neither had he worked as a skilled craftsman in stonework or other building trades. The other brothers and Zoram were not accomplished in these areas either. Nephi, no doubt, had seen these great buildings and knew of the manner of their construction, but this would have been a great feat for even a seasoned and skilled workforce, left alone a group of adventurers and wanderers. He necessarily needed the help of the Lord to accomplish the construction of a temple after the manner of the Temple of Solomon. The manner of the Temple of Nephi was necessarily done using the local andesite granite stone similar to the famed Jerusalem stone. The beautiful crafted fine stonework was what set the two temples apart from all other buildings with the finished height of the temples. These artisans were talented stonemasons that were required to shape the stones off-site so that the sound of the chisel and mallet would not be heard at the sacred Temple Mount. amount. The monolithic base stones for the temple walls were 1 to 200 tons in weight and were an incredible challenge to transport from the quarries to the temple grounds. The temple blocks were colossal stones, magnificently dressed by master craftsmen that would make their work celebrated for generations. These stones were set on top of one another so that finely carved and fit together that no mortar was needed to bond the blocks together. The stones were larger at the base and smaller as the courses rose in height. The Temple of Nephi can be described as being constructed in an Egyptian-like leaning manner. There could not be a more precise language than what Nephi used when he compared the two temples, that their manner of construction was the same. The finished work prompted Nephi to say, but the manner of the construction was like unto the Temple of Solomon, and the workmanship thereof was exceedingly fine. The temple during the time of Lehi. When Zenith returned again to the land of Nephi, then he records that his people repaired the walls of the city and the buildings. And we began to building, and to repair the walls of the city, yea, even the walls of the city of Lehi Nephi, and the city of Shiloh. Mosiah chapter 9, verse 8. During the reign of the wicked king Noah, Zenith's son, the temple was modified, and many other beautiful buildings were also built, using the burdensome taxes of the people. He also built a very high tower, presumably a lookout tower for danger. The record of the Book of Mormon states, and it came to pass that King Noah built many elegant and spacious buildings, and he ornamented them with fine work of wood, and of all manner of precious things, of gold, and of silver, and of iron, and of brass, and of ziph, and of copper. And he also built him a spacious palace, and a throne in the midst thereof, all of which was of fine wood, and was ornamented with gold and silver, and with precious things. And he also caused that his workmen should work all manner of fine work within the walls of the temple, of fine wood, and of copper, and of brass. And it came to pass that he built a tower near the temple, yea, a very high tower, even so high that he could stand upon the top thereof, and overlook the land of Shiloh, and also the land of Shemlon, which was possessed by the Lamanites. And he could even look over all the land round about. And it came to pass that he caused many buildings to be built in the land of Shiloh. And he caused a great tower to be built on the hill north of the land of Shiloh, which had been a resort for the children of the land, and thus he did do with the riches which he obtained by the taxation of his people. Mosiah chapter 11, verses 8 to 10 and 12 to 13. These verses clearly state that the temple was in use and worked on and maintained during the time of Zenith and his son Noah and his grandson Limhi. Also of interest are the very high towers that were built during this time by the temple and at the resort or the fortress of Shiloh. Another reference to the temple can be found during the time of Limhi, when Ammon came up from the city of Zarahemla to find the people of Zenith. The Book of Mormon relates, and now it came to pass on the morrow that King Limhi sent a proclamation among all his people, that thereby they might gather themselves together to the temple, to hear the words which he should speak unto them. At the time the temple was a central gathering place, where the people would come for instruction and to muster. After Limhi and his group of Nephites leave the city and the temple area, the Temple of Nephi is never mentioned again in the Book of Mormon. We assume it still existed and was used down through the centuries. The temple obviously was one of the best built and nicest buildings in the city, if not the best. But its use and purposes could have changed, and probably did change dramatically during the following centuries of Lamanite occupation. The Temple of Nephi was a gathering place and a mustering place in the city of Nephi, the center of the earth, the navel of the universe for the Nephite people. It would have been the center of knowledge and spiritual growth. One can only imagine the importance of this sacred building and its surrounding gardens that was established in their Nephite culture for 450 years. The Temple of Nephi after the time of Limhi. The Lamanites, who later occupied the city and controlled the temple, would have also known of its special nature and its importance. They would have most likely revered it, been wary of its spiritual significance, and also most likely superstitious of the temple and the religion of their enemies. The temple is never mentioned during the centuries of Lamanite control of the land of Nephi. However, many times during the history of these people, the Lamanites were led by dissident or apostate Nephites who would have definitely been aware of the temple and the religion of the Nephites. Even if they did not practice Christianity or the religion of the Nephites, they would have taught the other Lamanites about the importance of the temple. Also, at many times during their history, the Lamanites were converted to Christianity and became a righteous people. As well, many times there were visiting Nephite missionaries who also would have known about the importance of the temple and the temple rites. It would have been hard to believe that Ammon and his brethren would not have used the temple during their 14-year mission among the Lamanites in the land of Nephi. In fact, in Alma, it mentions that these sons of Mosiah were given free access to their temples and even taught the people at the temples. In reference Alma 23:2 and Alma 26:29. Even to the wicked portion of the Lamanites, the city of Nephi became their capital and the center of their world, their chief city. As late as 29 BC, Nephi and Lehi, sons of Helaman II, went to the land of Nephi to preach to the Lamanites. And with power and authority and with many mighty miracles from God, they converted most of the Lamanite nation. That the more part of the Lamanites were convinced of them because of the greatness of the evidences which they had received, the Lamanites had become, the more part of them, a righteous people, inasmuch that their righteousness did exceed that of the Nephites, because of their firmness and their steadiness in the faith. Helaman chapter 5 verse 50, chapter 6 verse 1. Summary of the Temple of Nephi. To summarize the important characteristics of the Temple of Nephi, we discover the following attributes. Number 1, the Temple of Nephi was built after the manner of the Temple of Solomon in method of construction. The design and function was similar, but not necessarily exactly the same. The physical location of the temple would have been on the north side of the top of the valley. With the temple facing east are some of the similarities. 2. The manner of construction of the Temple of Nephi was physically similar to the Temple of Solomon, except for the precious stones and other precious things of Solomon's temple. This would include colossal and exquisite stone work. Number 3, the temple block had a history of being a sacred edifice for centuries of the different cultures that occupied the city. It was their center of civilization, or chief city, the navel, or center of their universe. Number 4, we know that Nephi's temple also had a garden associated with it. These gardens probably would have had fountains and renowned beauty. Number 5, the temple was associated with a very tall tower that could overlook the surrounding cities of Shemlon and Shiblon. Number 6, the temple had secret passageways or tunnels connecting it to other areas to the north. Number 7, the Temple of Nephi was a sacred edifice that was revered for many centuries during the occupation of different groups of people after the original Nephite culture. Number 8, during the Zenith Noah Limhi era, the temple was refurbished and aggrandized. Presumably, it was given extra gold and silver ornamentation over and above the original temple construction. It should also be noted that the city of Nephi is never mentioned in the Great Destruction when the land was changed at the time of the coming of Christ. Also, of course, the temple is never mentioned after the time of Christ either, so it is likely a good possibility that the city survived and prospered after the Great Destructions. That is only speculation, but it would make sense that a major city and inhabited land like the city of Nephi would have been part of the list of cities mentioned in 3rd Nephi as having been destroyed if it had suffered such a fate. So, correspondingly, we should also assume that the Temple of Nephi also survived the Great Destruction if the city of Nephi survived. Our Heavenly Father wants all to come unto Christ, to receive the ultimate gift of eternal life. He would safeguard His temples so that they can be used for His eternal purposes. We believe that the Temple of Nephi, the Temple of Koricancha, survived the destruction when the whole face of the land was changed for the sake of the righteous inhabitants of the land of Nephi. The Temple of Nephi survived the destruction when the whole face of the land was changed for the sake of the righteous inhabitants of the land of Nephi for the next 400 years. The Temple of Nephi still exists today.